Progressive presents Mindfulness with Flow.
You are a mighty fortress of supreme knowledge. Progressive Direct has not only revealed their rates, but those of their competitors. If you were any more in the know, you would be drowning in, the know.
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates, because knowledge is power. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Which tight end will pay off more this season, Jordan Reed or Greg Olsen? Does the Marshawn Lynch hype train deserve more passengers? And does a contract year equal big production from Sammy Watkins? Plus, the KFFSC commissioner and NFL player agent Ferrell Elliott sits in the co-host chair this evening as we discuss the underrated passing attack in Denver, the forgotten running back in Minnesota, and the surprising 12th tight end off the board in the FFPC. We've got a great show for you. Ferrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your Eric Balkman Show edition of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Greetings and salutations, all you Balkaholics and Gerzakin addicts. Welcome to the latest episode of the Eric Balkman Show edition of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com right here on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. I am your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. My co-host this evening is filling in for the patron saint of fantasy football, the Dizzle Dave Gerzak. He's a longtime NFL player agent that also represents musicians like the Quiet Hollers, Kristen Diablo, and many more. He is also the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, an event now in its 16th year that has expanded even further to other states and countries and is taking registrations now for both online drafts and live drafts in Cincinnati and Louisville. You hear him on the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship podcast that he hosts with KFFSC player Rob Fetcher. And you know him as the unofficial third host of this show. My pleasure to welcome into the show one of my favorite people, Mr. Ferrell Elliott. Welcome back to the show, man.
It's a pleasure to join one of my favorite people, Balky.
You are way too kind. Way too kind. Once again, we've had a massive upgrade in co-hosting tonight. Ferrell, I got to ask you right at the top. I listened to the Kentucky podcast that you guys recorded. What time of night do you guys record this? It sounded like you were recording it right in the middle of the night last night.
We are late nighters, brother. Now think about this. You've got Robbie Fetcher, who has 3 children, all girls. He has to lay down the law, get the girls down, then come out. Jake Hellman, bass player extraordinaire of the Quiet Hollers, has to handle band practice and then show up. And then, of course, I'm part vampire, so that's the better time for me. So it's late. We go late, Balky.
You do go late. It also explains why I've never seen you eating anything with garlic in it, too, as well. Coming up on tonight's show is Isaiah Crowell, about to become the darling of fantasy drafts. What 2016 bust spent his offseason working out with Randy Moss, and should you be worried about Andrew Luck, plus much, much, much more. Shout out to the chat room right now. Feel free to post any questions you all might have in there if you want to connect with us on Twitter. The show is at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman. Ferrell and the KFFSC is on Twitter at KFFSC. You can post on our Facebook page at facebook.com/HSFF Hour. And if you want to chime in and talk with us, our phone number is 347-426-3682. That's 347-GAME-OVA. And of course, the email inbox is highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. KFFPC.com. If you have any questions for us here on this holiday weekend, our producer, mutual friend Rob, and audio engineer Bryce will get those to us later on in the fantasy feedback segment later on in the show. I do want to talk about the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, but before we do, I want to just let everybody know, in case you missed the emails this week or the FFPC social media, kind of an interesting week for the FFPC. The Football Guys Players Championship is live, has been live for almost a month now, $250,000 grand prize, $2 million prize pool, but the early bird deadline is tonight. So if you are listening live, if you want to get in on the FPC and get a free Football Guys Insider Pro subscription valued at $30, you can get in right now and get that for free. If you want to buy a 3-pack, you will get your Football Guys membership for 3 years. So it is a very good deal, and today is the last deal night that you can get that deal. Make sure you're signing up at myffpc.com. If you haven't heard, we're at Planet Hollywood on the Strip for our live events this year at the FFPC. Sign up for our main event in our high-stakes leagues that are actually filling up fairly quickly, even quicker than they did last year, and they're pretty quick last year. $250,000 grand prize, $1.7 million prize pool, and that our satellites are open, both draft experts and Superflex, starting at $35, Dynasty starting at $77, and we introduced the double up this week at the $35 level and the $250 level. It is a 12-team league. All you got to do is finish in the top 6. That's it. No huge risks that you need to take. You don't have to try to win the league and swing for the fences. Finish in the top 6, and you will get 2 free teams next year. So if you sign up for a 35 double up, you finish in the top 6, you get 2 free $35 teams next year. Same thing with the 250 as well. So it is very, very, very exciting time for the FFPC, as this is the last day in June. And I know as we are ramping up with the FFPC, the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship is also ramping up as well. If you have not signed up yet, go to KFFSC.com, Facebook.com/KFFSC, and of course, SquareUp.com/store/KFFSC. So you check that out. Ferrell, let's talk about what's available still with the Kentucky Championship this year. What events are still, what still has open spots? Is there anything live in Cincinnati, anything live in Kentucky, anything like that? Is there anything online? Tell us what needs to be filled yet.
Balky, we've got a lot of opportunities to play. The few things that are off the board are the Auction League, which you play in, and the Big Payback, which Dave Gerzak and Kurt play in. Those 2 are gone. Everything else is open. Cincinnati is filling quickly. And it's we need our Ohio boys to step up, because it's very interesting. We have one division with 1 spot left. It has 6 guys from Kentucky, 3 from Pennsylvania, and 2 from other states. Not one son of Ohio in that division. But, you know, Cincinnati is a much different experience, a smaller experience, but still a live event, and we have a very, very good time there, and that's why it's very popular and why it feels early. But we've got something for you to play. August 20th in Cincinnati, the 25th through the 27th at the Horseshoe, Southern Indiana.
One of my biggest regrets, and you know, God bless my life with the FFPC, because I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I do wish that I had that open weekend so I could go to Cincinnati as well, because I have such a great time in Louisville, seeing everybody there drafting live. Cincinnati, everybody I've talked to, Jamie Cox, Travis Cox, Justin McCord, all these guys who've gone to Cincinnati said, oh, it's so great. We get to do this back-to-back weekends. And there's other people that don't have the opportunity to go to Louisville, and they go to Cincinnati. And yeah, it is a little bit smaller, but it's still awesome. I mean, you get to spend all day drafting. It'd be a very fun experience for me. Hopefully, one of these years I get the chance to see you down there. Ferrell, a lot of people don't realize that you also have been an avid player with the FFPC for many, many years now, and you obviously host the Kentucky podcast, so you're very well-versed in fantasy. You're engrossed in it. You know what's going on. A lot of people say Rob Fetcher is the brains of your podcast, including yourself. I would disagree. I think you guys both bring a lot to the table there. So I got to ask you right now, with the second round sort of shaping up as ADP has sort of normalized until training camp, seeing a lot of different second-round running backs or different running backs go in the second round this year. And they have their share of upside, but they also have their warts. You look at Melvin Gordon, Jordan Howard, DeMarco Murray, Todd Gurley, Jay Ajayi, all these guys have ADPs right now in the FFPC of being in the second round. Is there a favorite that stands out for you among that 5?
There is one, yes. I really like Howard. I really like Gordon. Howard you had to play so many games last year with quarterback roulette. You know, he played a lot of those productive games with Barkley. I have to think he's going to have as good a year running the ball and perhaps better luck in the red zone. A lot of people don't feel that in the way I do, but I've just got a vibe that this player continues to improve. You know, there was only 7 running backs with 1,200-plus yards last year. He was one of them. I think he does as well. I think the touchdowns move up. Chicago becomes a little more competitive, and he continues to be the top player on that offense.
One of the more interesting things, and I was listening to the On the Couch podcast with football guys today as well, Sigmund Boom, Paul Charchian on there, and they were talking about the fact that Jordan Howard this wasn't even On the Couch. I think this was the Audible. I get them mixed up. Great stuff at footballguys.com. Anyway, Jordan Howard was the second leading rusher in the NFL last year, yet Chicago actually had the most number of receivers that scored at least 15 fantasy points a game, in a game last year. They had 5 of them. So their passing attack wasn't bad, and Jordan Howard still retained a lot of his value. I guess there's the possibility of a sophomore slump this year, but for everything that went wrong for the Bears last year, to have Jordan Howard put up the production that he did despite all that, it doesn't really get me all that discouraged about his prospects for 2017, even the fact that you have to pay a second-round pick for him. To me, it's just he might be the safest lot of those 5.
Yeah, I like him. The player that I don't like in that mix, or let's say that I like the least in that mix, is DeMarco Murray. If you paid any attention to the Titans as you went into the end of the season, Henry got much more play, and I expect him to continue that. And there's just too much competition for carries there, as opposed to some of the other players.
You look at the fact that DeMarco Murray did tail off last year, and I feel like if you're drafting him in the second round right now, he's going right in the middle of the second round in FFPC drafts. You might actually be paying for his ceiling there. And Derrick Henry continues.
Yes.
He creeped up quite a bit, and then he sort of, his ADP lagged a little bit, and now he's climbing back up there again. So definitely a situation to pay attention to in Tennessee as we move forward into draft season. Jordan Reed, Greg Olsen, a couple of tight ends that are 3 and 4 off the board. Reed going at the beginning of the third round, the 301. Greg Olsen going at the 306. Ferrell, if you decide in an FFPC draft this year that you're going to be taking a tight end in the early part of the third round, is it going to be Jordan Reed for you, or is it going to be Greg Olsen?
And my heart says Jordan Reed. My head says Greg Olsen all day long. Durability and consistency from Olsen is what I like. And Cam Newton's saying he's going to run the ball a little less this year. Well, we'll see when he gets on the field. But still, it's difficult to look at a lineup and find one that makes you feel as good as a tight end with Olsen. With Reed, you're always waiting for that next head injury, and it could be a season ender for him.
And the fact that you get Greg Olsen, I mean, okay, you look at the upside, and the ceiling with Jordan Reed is clearly higher. But is he worth? Is that upside? Is that ceiling worth the risk in the third round when you can get Greg Olsen, who's been Mr. Steady Eddie in that offense for several years? I think it just makes sense to mitigate risk a little bit and try to get Olsen on your team rather than Reed in that situation. So I'm with you. I can't remember the last time. I think the last time I drafted Jordan Reed was when he was he wasn't being picked very high, and I don't know if he was coming off a concussion or some serious injury, but he was my backup tight end that I was drafting, and I don't think I've drafted him since then. So, and I've had a lot of shares of Greg Olsen over the years as well. Ferrell, Isaiah Crowell is kind of an interesting guy that we've talked about on this show, a guy that plays behind a much improved offensive line this year. Cleveland sunk a lot of money in free agency to improve their offensive line this year, so that's going to be good for Crowell. He actually had more catches. I don't have the official stat, but he had more catches down the stretch over Duke Johnson last year. For as many people that want to talk about Duke Johnson being the pass catcher in that offense, Isaiah Crowell is actually catching more passes than him at the end of last season. So you look at what he could be this year, the sky's the limit. Then you look at what he did last year and the fact that 50% of his yardage actually came on, I think it was like 16 carries. So he had a lot of big plays that I don't know how repeatable they are. But then you could look at the other aspect and say, well, look, he did it last year. What's the sense that he wouldn't be able to do it again this year with an improved line? He's currently going in the 4th round of FFPC drafts. Is he a breakout running back that will be on a lot of championship teams this season?
I think as we spoke about a player earlier, you're looking at his ceiling. You've already seen his best football. You've seen his most explosive plays. This is a player that if you're in a position where you've gone 0 running back and you say, wow, it's time now for me to get a running back, and he's there, you're going to look at his numbers and say, I can live with him as my number 1 running back. But can you? I don't know if we get this kind of production from Isaiah Crowell, and he's not the player that I want on my team.
Ferrell, I'm just looking over the show notes tonight, and I don't see it anywhere on here. So I wanted to bring it up because I heard you guys talking about this on the Kentucky podcast last night, which actually you can download on iTunes or go to KFFSC.com and download it there. It's a very good show. I listen to it every single episode that comes out. Let's talk about Eddie Lacy here, because this is a guy that every single year, ever since he was, going in the first round, the first half of the first round, in some cases the number 1 overall pick, this is a guy that I seem to gravitate towards every single year, and I rationalize it in my head, and I say I'm not going to overpay for him this year. Well, first it's I'm not drafting him this year, and then it's I'm not going to overpay for him this year, and then it's I'm only going to take him at a value, and then I end up grabbing him, in all these drafts. And so I feel like this is the first year I'm finally like, okay, I think I can put Eddie Lacy behind me. I can look at other running backs. I feel like I'm finally over. And then I listened to the podcast last night, and now I feel like you got me back on him again. Tell me why things are going to be different for him in Seattle this year.
Because I think he's got people that believe in him. I just go back to the one play that frustrated me so much. I think it was against Kansas City. It was a rainy night. He had a 20-yard rush, and at the end the ball came loose and he fumbled. And he goes to the bench. And he's always sort of been the whipping boy of that coaching staff. I think he's going to land in a place that is going to give him a rebirth, so to speak, give him a first opportunity to get on the field and play with a little looseness. I think we'll see something with this player. Now, if he balloons in his weight way up the scale again, all bets are off. But based on where you can get this player, I really like him.
Yeah, in FFPC drafts right now, Eddie Lacy is still going fairly late. I mean, the end of the 6th round for a guy who was paid to be a starting running back in Seattle. And his main competition is 2 guys that have been very, they've been hurt quite a bit in their NFL careers, in Thomas Rawls and C.J. Prosise. So, all right, I think Ferrell's convinced me. We have to take a quick break while I send an apology letter to Eddie Lacy and totally revamp my draft board now that I'm back on the Lacy train. We're going to have much more right after this with Ferrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. I'm Eric Balkman. This is the HSFF Hour right here on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. The Eric Balkman Show edition of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour rolls on here on this gorgeous 4th of July holiday weekend here in Northeast Wisconsin. I'm talking with Ferrell Elliott tonight, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Ferrell, you're always out and about, seeing all of the acts that you represent, all the musicians. Summer is the time of music festivals. What do you have planned for this holiday weekend?
Just got for the holiday weekend. I am staying in the confines of beautiful Louisville, Kentucky, Balky. In June, I've been in Brooklyn. I've also been in south side of Chicago, Yorkville, Illinois, for a festival. But my greatest experience in music is always coming to Appleton for the Mile of Music. And I was with a number of bands that will be there this year. In Appleton on that first weekend in August this year, 3 through 6. 225 bands, 800 performances. You and I, Baki, are going to make our way to at least 15 or 20 of them. It's going to be great.
Yeah, at a minimum. It's kind of a surreal thing. I don't know how many years they've been doing the Mile of Music. I feel like it's been 3 or 4 now. And
this is
the great
5.
thing about Appleton, okay, 5, yeah, exactly. So Appleton is a city of about 70,000 people here in Wisconsin, and there is a line, and Two-Packer's in the chat, he could probably help me out with this, on both sides of the street on College Avenue, which is the busiest street in Appleton, just bars lined up on both sides. And basically for an entire week, or almost the better part of a week, you have a different band playing like every hour at all these venues throughout the week. It's a fantastic live music festival. The people come from all over. Obviously, Ferrell comes in from Louisville, and I went to it last year. It was a great time. Of course, Two-Packer was out there, Dave Gerzak, the real Leroy. A great time, and can't wait. And, of course, Premium User was there last year as well. So we look forward to that coming up in August. Before we get to August, we have a ton of drafts to get to throughout the month of July, which you can check out at myffpc.com. Ferrell, in drafts this season that you have done, that you will be doing, how much of an emphasis are you putting on getting an elite or a stud running back in the first few rounds? Because we saw zero RB used by more players than ever last season in high stakes drafts, and it didn't really work out for the majority of them, or for some of them, I should say. And we may not see that this year. So for your drafts, are you trying to get a stud bell cow running back in the first couple of rounds, or are you just simply looking for value at receiver, tight end, running back, wherever it may be?
Here in Kentucky, you can decide where you're going to draft. So that changes everything. I could throw that same question back to you next day, Balky, what are you going to do? Because if you end up 1, 2, 3, you're likely to take one of those 3 guys. I do not believe in a slump for Ezekiel Elliott. David Johnson is obviously going first. And Balky, how many drafts have you facilitated? Has Johnson gone first in all of them?
Not all of them. I have seen Elliott go first. I've seen Le'Veon Bell go first in a couple of them. I saw Brown go first in one, actually. But I would say on a percentage basis, out of, 4 or 5 dozen drafts I've facilitated, on a percentage basis, David Johnson is going number 1 overall in 75 to 80% of them.
So if you're in those first 3 spots, you really can't look past one of those guys. So if you're not, now you're – and if you believe at all in the zero running back philosophy, this is a golden age for you, because people are jumping on these running backs, and so the receivers that you're going to be able to collect, especially at the end of the first round or the middle of the first round, they're great bargains. So you can get everyone to agree who those first 3 guys are, but I don't think you can get everyone to agree on who the next 5 guys are. I think there's some people that would argue with our list, and some people that would say, well, I don't want DeMarco Murray. Some people don't believe in Gordon. So it's going to be very entertaining. Just depends on who the guys you line up with. I want to have one running back. I want to have one running back in those first 2 rounds. Depends on where I'm going to end up, where I'm going to draft. I'm not so I hate the middle, Balky. I hate the middle of the draft, always have. But I'm not worried as much about it this year, because if I'm looking then at the next top 3 receivers, and I'm sitting at the 6th spot, and I feel pretty sure that I can get my hands on a receiver that I'm going to love, the one I love the best this year is Mike Evans, and I'm going to be very, very happy with that. And then I'll see what kind of running back I can get in the 2nd round, and I might go receiver there. It's just, I like to take who I think is the very best player. So it's a very exciting time to draft, because I find it's very unpredictable as to what people are going to do this year. And draft boards will look, even late in September, draft boards will look different as you move around the room at Planet Hollywood and see what everyone's doing. ADP means very little in a lot of these drafts this year.
Yeah, especially when we get to the main event when everybody just throws it out the window and they're just getting their guys no matter what. You look at one of the great aspects of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. You use your fab money, your blind bidding, your waiver budget. You use that money to actually buy your draft slot. So if you want the number 1, you can have it. It's all a matter of who wants it the most. I feel like the last couple of years I've wanted to draft in the back end. I don't know if that's the case this year. I think I might end up paying up and try to get one of those first 3 spots, because I think clearly if you were going to be buying one of those top 3 spots in Kentucky, you want one of those top running backs. The middle is chock full of stud receivers. You also see LaShawn McCoy right in the middle there in of the first round, and then Melvin Gordon, Devontae Freeman hanging around at the end of the first round, the early second round too. So I think you look at it's whatever spot you want to buy, that's basically telling people how you want to start your team. And I think, I don't want to say team construction's overrated, but I feel like this year more than ever, give me the guy that not only is the best player, but the guy that the team is giving the most opportunity for to be successful. Give me the guy who is the running back that makes the engine go. Give me the receiver that is being peppered with targets. Mike Evans, a perfect example, that is just being peppered with targets over and over again. Antonio Brown, another perfect example too. Ezekiel Elliott. I think that those guys, it's just, the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, and just get the guys who touch the ball the most, who the teams are going to give them the opportunity to touch the ball the most. And I just think that that's, the way to win, not only this year, but every year, Ferrell.
Yeah, every year.
Ferrell, let's talk about Golden Tate versus Julian Edelman. And I bring these guys up here because as far as the FFPC goes, they're actually going fairly close together in drafts right now. You have Golden Tate going at the end of the 4th, early 5th. Julian Edelman, the early 5th, mid-5th, sometimes he slips to. You look at these guys both playing in offenses where they're a big part of it. Maybe Julian Edelman less a part of the offense with Brandon Cooks being added to New England this year. Of course, Rob Gronkowski coming back from health. And Detroit really didn't do much on offense except for add Kenny Golladay. And, they're hoping for another step for Eric Ebron. I don't know if they're going to see it this year. But when you look at those two players between Tate and Edelman, which one do you sort of see yourself leaning towards in drafts this year?
You're tempted to say this is the same guy, but they're really not. I looked at Tate last year. The drafters that had him were pretty much pulling their hair out by week 4. Very, very little was happening for Golden Tate. Some really, really poor games, a few targets, very few catches, and then I don't know what happened. Perhaps there was a meeting in the wide receiver room. Perhaps some coaches stepped in. If you look at games 5 through 16, Golden Tate was a completely different, productive player, and ended up with statistics that were very similar to Edelman. Edelman is a more consistent receiver. There's other targets there, but Edelman always seems to get his because he and Brady have a chemistry that is hard to argue with, and it's plus Edelman has a toughness that very few players have. We've seen him play with a myriad of problems, including feet, sprained ankle, that would have put other players on the bench. So I'm going to lean towards Edelman here if they're in the same place. I really like the Golladay kid out of Northern Illinois. He's a big target. He's not I don't think physically he's matured yet. I think he's going to be an even better player as the years move on in the NFL. He looks a little bit like a basketball player right now. But I also saw Golladay catch 14 passes in a college game this year. I think this kid really has a big catching radius and can go get Stafford's passes. So it's going to be pretty cool watching that player develop this year. So I'm going to lean a little bit towards Edelman here, but either player, you'd love to have him on the roster.
I'm curious, now that I hear you, speak well of Edelman, and not that you were speaking ill of Golden Tate. You clearly like both of them. Do you feel like Brandon Cooks is maybe a little overrated going at the 304 in FFPC drafts right now? Is he a player that you're willing to take? If you have that early first-round pick when it comes back to you to get Cooks in the early third, is he the type of player that you'd be willing to take maybe as your number 1 receiver or number 2 receiver at that spot?
I would love to have him, but I don't want to pay that much for him, and it's going to be a little hit or miss with him. But the guy who gambles and hits on it, if Cooks really becomes what New England obviously feels he can become, and he becomes a preeminent number one receiver in that offense. Whoever gambles on him there could find themselves on the leaderboard at the FFPC. So he's that kind of player that you're very tempted to take. I don't want to take him at the beginning of third, but if I'm on that 3-4 turn, that's where I'm looking for him. If I could get lucky enough to get him, I'd be glad to have it. I think there's big plays and a lot of touchdowns there.
Speaking with Ferrell, Elliott, of course, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. You can register for leagues with the KFFSC at KFFSC.com. For more information, you can always go to Facebook.com/KFFSC. Ferrell, I want to get this on the record here with you. We just touched on it a little bit, but I don't think there's – I mean, you've been on this show I don't know how many times. I mean, probably, close to 24 at this point, be it, co-hosting as a guest, hosting Pros versus Joes with me or what have you. You've been on a bunch. And I don't think you've ever come on this show and not gone out of your way to say how much you dislike picking in the middle of the round. You always seem to like the ends much more than the middle. Now, you said something that kind of caught me off guard, that maybe it's not as bad this year. Is this the best year for you that you can remember of, and maybe this is a bad way of phrasing it, but is this the least worst year to draft in the middle? Are you okay picking in the middle of FFPC drafts this year?
Yes, I think so, and I might be getting more comfortable with it. Of course, I got it again last year. My main event team, I had the 7th pick, and I think people at that time thought I reached a little bit. I took Ezekiel Elliott, and Zeke made a huge difference for me. I ended up the runner-up in my division. So I'm a little more comfortable with it this year. Yeah, from the first round and all the way through the draft, I think I can function with it a little bit better. When you're in the middle, you're counting on a lot of drafters to make mistakes, and something falls to you. And when you play at the level of the FFPC, when you play in our thing in Kentucky, you're not playing against people that are going to make many mistakes, and I'm talking about all through the draft. So many times when you're sitting in the middle, you see so many things go away from you, and then you see so many things going away the other way. And I'm not the only one that's been bitten with that. Very, very early in playing in the FFPC, I sat next to Mark Morier once, and he screamed every time I took a player because I got him going and coming. And so that's kind of how I feel. But it worked for me last year, and if that's what the cards are dealt to me, I'm going to man up and play it. But I would much rather be at the end. I love the aspect of saying that if I have the 11th or 12th spot, that I'm going to get 2 of the top dozen or so players. And if somebody does make a mistake in my mind, I'm going to move up a little bit. So I like it at the end.
We had our guest on the show last week, Dan Thomas, who's going to be playing in the Pros vs. Joes competition the end of July coming up. A longtime player of the FFPC. And he always, because he likes to draft early, and, we were talking about his teams and what they look like, and he said, Eric, and I look at my teams when I'm done drafting this early, and none of them look good because there's so many strange names on them. There's names that you wouldn't associate for being listed at the spots that I got them in. They just look weird. They look bizarre, and I don't like them. And I think one of the weird names to me, at least this year, is seeing the number 12 tight end go off the board in the FFPC. It's Jack Doyle, and he's going in the 8th round of FFPC drafts right now. This is essentially a guy who's being drafted as a quote-unquote starting tight end in these 12-team formats, and he's going in the 8th round of this tight end premium scoring system here at the FFPC. Ferrell, does that seem like, we'll do the Goldilocks analogy, too early, too late, or just right for Jack Doyle?
That's too early for Jack Doyle, and it'll prove out. If he's the 12th rated tight end, that's essentially all he's ever going to be, is a 12th rated tight end. When drafters see some of these rookies, Howard, Evan Ingram with the Giants, how do you pronounce the kid with the Browns? David Njoku?
Njoku, sure, yeah.
Njoku from Miami. When people see these players, they're going to forget about blue-collar Jack Doyle for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, that the old New York Giants offensive lineman that they refer to as Bag of Donuts. That's kind of what Doyle reminds me of. And Doyle is a very, very solid player. But he is just that, a solid player. There's some star ball. Fleener, it went rough for him last year. It'll probably go better this year. Vance McDonald is a tight end who look what Hoyer did with Barnage. Hoyer's going to have some targets out there to throw to. Vance McDonald is one of them. So I think we're going to see a lot of guys move up in front of Doyle, and the people that are drafting Doyle, if they're drafting him in the 8th round, now they're not going to like their team as much as they could have. So begin to look at some of these players that are going to get some playing time. Some of these young players coming in the league at that position.
Ferrell, you're a draft experts guy. You love the best ball format. You've drafted in a bunch of them over the years. Conversely, if you're not on Jack Doyle in the 8th, you look at what Eric Swope could do in that Colts offense. He's not going until the 19th. To me, that's like the type of guy you'd want in an FFPC format as your number 3 tight end. A lot of upside, and you can get him pretty late. Get him pretty late in drafts.
Yes, and if I'm going in the FFPC format of drafting 28, I'm going to look for 4, maybe 5 tight ends. So and they're out there. There's some players out there that can play the position. One of them doesn't even have a team yet.
One of them doesn't have a team.
One of them doesn't have a team. I think one of the interesting players to pick if you're in one of those formats here is Gary Barnage becomes a very interesting player. I imagine that he and his representation are waiting for the right opportunity. They're waiting for somebody to guarantee some money beyond the veteran minimum, and he's going to move. And even in redraft leagues, he may still be on the street through week 1, 2, or 3. But no one's playing their 17, 18 round draft pick in week 1, 2, or 3 anyway. There's a player that you can draft and see where he's going to end up because he's better than most every team's number 2. So many of these teams want to use 21 personnel and play the 2 tight ends. So it's a situation that if somebody goes down, Barnage comes in and becomes quite a target at tight end. I love the idea of drafting him late.
The latest around the NFL right now regarding Barnage is that Baltimore might be looking at Gary Barnage. And if you remember, they had a guy in Baltimore last year who wasn't even slated to be the starter, who had to step in when Ben Watson tore his Achilles. Dennis Pitta comes in, him and his, whatever number hip replacement he was on, he caught 86 balls in that offense last year. So you look at Gary Barnage, a guy who really crushed it on a bad Cleveland team. Makes a lot of sense in Baltimore as well. So definitely got to pay attention to. Ferrell, you just gave us Gary Barnage as a potential late-round sleeper in the FFPC DE format. But an early-round guy that you don't think you'll be getting on too many teams because you're avoiding him, because there's a lot of bust potential with him. Give us that guy, and then a guy that is flying under the radar along with Gary Barnage that you're going to actually try to target in a few leagues this year.
Probably a bust potential just means that the other first-round picks are going to outplay him. I'm going to stay away from Des Bryant this year. I think the Cowboys are a team that's built to rush the ball. I think they've got a passing attack that is going to be a little more conservative. They're not going to have to hit it downfield quite often, and Bryant will no doubt have his big games, but I see lesser targets for Bryant than I do any of those receivers that are on the board at the end of the first round, beginning of the second. So I'm probably going to stay away from Bryant, and I'll throw Gronkowski in there. There's a player that I would stay away from too, because of everything he's been through physically. I'm ready to just avoid that at all costs this year.
And a player that maybe, in these FFPC, in your main event FFPC or in your draft experts league, or maybe what you could give us is some insight into the KFFSC, a guy that you think is flying under the radar based on what your conversations have been with Kentucky players that are going to be drafting this year shortly? A guy that you think is being underrated right now?
Underrated. That's there's so many. I just admire so many players. I don't think I ever underrate anyone. On the show I did with Fetch yesterday, I guess I'll replay that. I'm a big Adam Thielen fan at Minnesota in that offense with the offensive coordinator Schumer coming in. I'm a big fan of him, a player that's dropped down the boards, and you would have to tell me where he's being picked. But Sterling Shepard, who I was very high on last year and rewarded in my belief in him, especially when he found the end zone 8 times. I think we're dealing with a player here that's continually improving. I don't think there's a sophomore slump. I also understand there's more targets there, but I think this player is going to be a featured player in this offense. And as Eli approaches 5,000 yards, a lot of them are going through Shepard. So I continue to like Shepard when other people have possibly said goodbye to him. And some of my 20th round wonders, they're definitely out there. I absolutely love them, and I'll find them as training camp goes on. Just because Eric Decker was signed down at Tennessee, don't look away from Tywan Taylor, who should be very, very productive in that offense. And I could go on and on with those guys, but I will. I may not draft the most complete teams, but if there was an award given for the 18th through 20th round, sometimes I think I'd win it every year.
Well, the 20th round wonders sounds like a fantastic team name for you in the FFPC this year. You did name, by the way, 3 double-digit guys. Tywan Taylor not going in 20-round drafts right now with the FFPC. He's a guy that's going right around there in draft experts formats. But then you look at Sterling Shepard. The 1407 is his current ADP, and Adam Thielen, still technically a double-digit round pick as he is going at the 1001 in drafts right now, the Football Guys draft. So, a couple of guys that, and I talk about the sweet spot. I was on the Roto Underworld podcast with Matt Kelly, which, by the way, if you're not listening to Matt Kelly's podcast on playerprofiler.com/podcast, you're doing it wrong. This guy is one of the most entertaining guys in the industry, a guy who's going to be drafting in Pros vs. Joe. He's going to be drafting in the FFPC main event live at Planet Hollywood this year. I had a blast. It was almost a 2-hour podcast, and we were talking about a lot of different things. We got into prom dates, donuts, the usual suspects, a little fantasy football as well. It was a great time. But we were talking about a lot of different things on that show, and Matt Kelly would actually agree with me in saying that there is a sweet spot in the FFPC in that 9th to 11th round. There's a lot of guys who are going to be target hogs in there, who we perceive as going to be target hogs in those offenses, including Jeremy Maclin, Eric Decker, Adam Thielen, like Ferrell just brought up, Tyrell Williams, who's being underrated right now, Cameron Meredith, Mike Wallace, all these guys, Corey Coleman is another guy, Quincy Enunwa, for goodness sakes. All these guys have the potential to have a ton of targets on them this year, and you should probably be hitting at least one of those guys, maybe 2 of them, in that 9th, 10th, 11th round in a fairly good share of your drafts this year. I feel like that is going to be a big key to success, not only for FFPC drafts, but for Kentucky drafts as well, Ferrell, because everybody always is trying to get those receivers in Kentucky. And and we're going to talk much more about Kentucky as we move on throughout the rest of the podcast. But for anybody who is too excited to listen to the rest of the show without signing up for a Kentucky main event team, for any of those teams that are still available live in Cincinnati, Louisville, or online, what is the best way for them to jump in to the KFFSC this year?
Everyone that's a millennial can go to the website, KFFSC.com, and follow all the links, and go to Facebook, follow all the links, and get to us and sign up online. It's always great to open up your computer and see all the players that have joined the league. But if you're an old school guy like me and you just like to talk on the phone and get to know people, my number is 502-523-5057. We're working through the holiday weekend. I love working holidays, Balky. Work like hell on every holiday except Christmas. And I'll be there 502-523-5057. Give us a call. We'll talk about it, find out what you want to do, maybe tell you some things that you should do, and you can figure it all out. Danny Mueller and Jeremy Roach are coming in this year after playing online last year. They booked a whole schedule of events with us to spend the entire weekend at Balky, and all he says to me, all Danny says to me is, I want to draft against Eric. I want to draft against Eric. So we'll see that.
Hey,
we'll see that too. Holding a terrible grudge against the Balky, the Danny Mueller.
He knows the easiest way to win is those 11-team leagues with me as the 12th team. So he knows how to butter his bread in those. And I'll tell you what, Jeremy Roach and Danny Mueller, both former guests of this show, they have the Brad and Tim Cruz strategy of we're going to be drafting all weekend. Let's draft in every single draft we can and maximize, the most fun that we can have. So I have no doubt that those guys will, I'll bash heads with them more than once in Louisville this year. That's very cool that they will be drafting live. I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited to continue to talk to the commissioner, Ferrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. We have much more with him. I'm Eric Balkman. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. I'm going to answer some emails, get to some news right after this on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. Happy early July 4th to everybody out there, unless you're downloading this later, in which case I hope you had a great happy 4th of July. This is Eric Balkman on the Eric Balkman Show edition of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, co-hosting with Ferrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, NFL player agent. Always great to pick your brain on that, Ferrell. Very exciting stuff as we go in to the rundown tonight. I want to thank Football Guys, Roto World, Draft Sharks, and, of course, Rob for tonight's rundown, preparing this. Let's talk about what's going on around the NFL right now. This is the slow season, but there's still stuff out there that you can read between the lines and get a leg up on your league mates, the guys that you will be drafting against, the guys that you're drafting against right now, and try to get that competitive advantage. LeGarrette Blount can earn $50,000 if he weighs between 240 and 245 pounds on the day that training camp opens for the Eagles. This according to a source from Field Yates from ESPN.com. LeGarrette Blount has always been a big back. He was the big bruiser that scored 18 touchdowns for New England last year. With the Eagles probably letting Ryan Matthews go. I know I saw a report it wasn't a report, but it was a quote from Derek Sproul saying that he expects Ryan Matthews and LeGarrette Blount to share the load, the running back load this year, with Sproles being the third down guy. They have some small guys on that team in Pumphrey and Sproles that would be the passing, pass catchers in that offense. But you look at LeGarrette Blount, Ferrell, going at the 10.02 for a starting running back, that seems cheap to me. I know he's not going to catch a ton of passes, but in an offense that Philly really, did a lot, put an emphasis on improving from 2016 to this year, LeGarrette Blount seems like he could be a value in the 10th round.
There's your zero running back strategy, and if you've gone all wide receivers early, why do you need your running back to catch passes? Blount makes an excellent running back. And no, he won't get 18 touchdowns, but he could get 10. That's a lot.
LeGarrette Blount going at the 10.02 right now in FFPC drafts. And Ferrell's right. I mean, if you're getting your receivers early, there's no reason that you need to target pass catchers for your running backs that late. So he makes a lot of sense, especially given what he was able to do just last year. It does not seem like he has gone off any sort of a cliff. When we have Ferrell Elliott on, we are going to talk Raiders football, and I was not going to let Ferrell get away without me picking his brain on Marshawn Lynch. Offensive coordinator Todd Downing said he's pleasantly surprised me at every turn, everything that we've seen on him thus far, and of course we've only been in pajamas out there practicing, but what we've seen so far has been fantastic, and I'm as excited as the rest of Raider Nation to see what he's got. Marshawn Lynch, who is 31 years old, did not play in the NFL last year, going at the end of the 6th round of FFPC drafts. Ferrell, what's the inside scoop on Lynch? Is he for real? Is he going to outperform that draft spot right there?
No, of course he will. When I ask you, Balky, how many yards is he going to rush for? Just give me a number off the top of your head.
Off the top of my head, I'll say 1,100.
Okay, 1,100. 1,200 last year, there were only 7 guys that did it. So, of course, he's already a value there. You know, the thing about Marshawn, and I haven't spent a great deal of time with him because I've never had too many players where he is, but I've run into him at certain functions, at certain camps where he's coming to support a teammate, showing up, doing the camp, and he is a clown. He's the absolute class clown, and like all of class clowns, or like all of comedians, has a little bit of a dark side sometimes, you know, and so he can be difficult to deal with in certain social situations. But he is, you know, players that come a year away from football and can come back. This is very, very unusual that players can do that. Usually they have to leave the game. The reason you don't see it happen very often is players leave the game with some injury, some sort of nagging injury that without the treatment that they have on, you know, within the team structure, their bodies just continue to fall apart and they can't really make that comeback. Lynch just walked away from the game, which means he can walk back into the game fresh, not only physically, but mentally in his hometown situation in an area where he's looking to thrive. This is a wonderful signing by Reggie McKenzie. He made a brilliant decision to do this, and I think it's going to work, and I think it's going to work very, very well.
You know, he's another guy, too, when you look at people who go zero RB. If you get 4 receivers and a tight end in your first 5 rounds, you'd have Marshawn Lynch in the 6th round right now, basically almost anywhere in the 6th round as your number 1 running back. There's a lot worse ways to build your team than with that strategy. So I kind of like that, and I'm with you on Lynch. I think he does have a good season this year. I am on the Team Lynch bandwagon. Let's talk about a team that he is going to be competing against in that AFC West division, and that's the Denver Broncos. Mike Kliss, who's a Broncos insider, says that he thinks Denver's actually going to be going pass-heavy this year. The quote from him, it's pretty much the same offense. McCoy passed down to Adam Gase in 2013 and 2014 when Peyton Manning handed off only to allow receivers like Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders to catch their breath. The Denver offenses weren't quite as prolific as far as the passing attack goes that Mike Kliss would have you believe. The 2013 Broncos, 2nd in pass attempts, 10th in pass rate. 2014, 9th in attempts, 16th in rate. If the Broncos get to that level in 2017, though, it would be an improvement. They were 17th in attempts last year, 18th in rate. And honestly, Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders outperformed their draft spots last year. And you look at where they're going right now, Ferrell. Thomas at the 309, Emmanuel Sanders at the 605. I know I'm going to be targeting Demaryius Thomas in a lot of drafts this year if he remains at that spot. And Emmanuel Sanders, I'm sure I'm going to have on a good number of teams as well. To me, if you're drafting now, which you should be, you should probably be looking at these guys every single time they're still available at those spots, because I believe that those guys are at a value right now.
Yes, and I like Sanders more than Thomas just because there's nothing particularly against Thomas, but there's very, very comparable value there, and I would rather wait. It's like you talked about that sweet spot of the draft. A clear argument against the zero running back strategy. Look at all this depth in wide receivers that we're talking about. There's tremendous groups of wide receivers. Perfect example of Thomas and Sanders being available. I don't know what's happening in that backfield in Denver, and I just want to stay away from it. I like all the players, but, they're going to have to throw the ball in a lot of games to stay in the games. And if that's the way their offense is going, who do you want to pick at running back out of that group?
I'll tell you right now, in these situations, Ferrell, and we actually have, I think, a Facebook message from a listener, and I won't reveal it just yet. But in those situations, I tend to, if I'm going to grab a piece of it, it's going to be whatever the cheapest piece is. Because there's way too much risk with drafting the stud or the quote-unquote starter or even the backup in some cases. I'm going with the cheapest piece. We're going to get to the Denver backfield coming up after the break. Before we get to that, I want to talk about Marvin Jones because he was a guy that underperformed for a lot of teams last year. Gerzak just went off on Marvin Jones, I think the last couple of weeks on the show. He had that massive 200-yard game against the Packers and really did nothing outside of that the rest of the season. He actually spent part of his offseason working out with Randy Moss, and Jim Caldwell actually likes what he has been seeing from Marvin Jones so far this season. 408 yards through Marvin Jones' first 3 games, 4 touchdowns through his first 6, and just really tailed off after that. 26 catches for 401 yards after the first 7 weeks of the season. He was outside the top 70 for receivers last year at that portion of the season. He should bounce back. It seems like people are having that sour taste in their mouths. Again, a guy going in the middle of drafts, the 12-10 right now for Marvin Jones, Ferrell, a guy that you could get as your number 5, maybe even number 6 receiver, and he could actually pay off for you on those bye weeks when you need to start him.
Oh, yeah, but that's the thing. I would need to start him. And, we just talked about Tate. Tate was invisible for the first 4 games and then played well the rest of the year, fantasy-wise, created numbers. Jones, a great start to the season, and then he became invisible. Maybe we're dealing with an offense here that can only support one primary big number wide receiver, big statistical wide receiver in this offense. I don't know. You would look at the numbers of the quarterback and say, 4,400 yards last year. Maybe he gets to 5,000 yards this year. There's enough there for both wide receivers. But it didn't play out that way last year, and I think Tate's the guy here, and I want to stay away from Jones because I don't want to have to play him. I watched him on Thanksgiving. I didn't even know he was on the field until the fourth quarter. But so I don't want a whole lot to do with Mark Jones.
The great thing about Golden Tate is he really is the only proven guy in that, not only the Detroit passing game, but in the Detroit offense. You look at what they're doing in the backfield with, Abdullah and Riddick and Zenner. And I guess Riddick, you can make the case as proven, but he had some health issues last year. I mean, Golden Tate seems like the rock-solid pick if you're going to go with a Detroit Lion. Corey Coleman is currently recovering from a strained hamstring. Again, this is something that he's been dealing with since he was playing college ball for the Baylor Football Bears. The wide receiver coach for Cleveland, Al Saunders, said that he's disappointed that Coleman can't get out on the field to continue his growth, but he actually expects Coleman to return in time for training camp on the 26th, so hopefully he can shake this hamstring injury and really have that breakout season that some people actually thought he might have with the opportunity that he's presented with in Cleveland last year. Corey Coleman, again, in those mid-round receivers, Ferrell, he's one of them going at the 10:04. What are your thoughts on the prospects for Coleman in the Browns offense this year?
Of all those receivers that we talked about being available in the 10th round, Coleman is of little interest to me. Now, he's going to be a fine spot in the Browns offense, but yes, it is the Browns offense. And he's already, we haven't started the season yet, and he's already having physical problems. You're talking about guys out in Oakland, the quote was playing in pajamas. It must be a little cool out there in the Bay Area. But, these guys are walking around in shorts and T-shirts. So, when you're already having physical problems, and a hamstring issue can be a problem that follows a player throughout the entire year. This is a speed player, so he's got a hamstring issue. There's question at quarterbacks. This is not a very talented football team. Let's look at another receiver.
Yeah, and there's plenty of them there, too. I mean, the thing is, you can go for upside if you want there, and Corey Coleman does have a lot of upside, but there's a lot of other receivers with upside in that area of the draft. And I feel like I'm going to keep talking about this, especially during Pros vs. Joes. I think there's going to be a lot of great deals for people getting those receivers there. Last thing I want to get to, Ferrell, before we get to our final break of the show is Cooper Kupp. Alden Gonzalez of ESPN.com says Kupp has established himself as the go-to slot receiver for the LA Rams. Should become a pretty regular target for Jared Goff this year. He is a rookie from Eastern Washington that has drawn a lot of comps to Eric Decker among the scouting community, given the fact that he is so polished already. He does have great hands He's not a flashy guy, but there's not a lot of flash in that Rams offense. And again, a guy that you can get super late. I feel like I just keep talking about all these upside guys, but you can get him late right now. Cooper Kupp, is he a guy that you'd be willing to invest, a post 15th round pick in this year, Ferrell?
I'm going to draft him a little earlier because I want to get him. I think the quarterback is going to be all right. He's not going to be successful. He's not going to be great, but he's going to be all right. And there's no one that really plays that position there. They want to do different things with Austin. So with Kupp, he's a player that impressed everyone at the Senior Bowl. There was very little in the scouting community that thought that he wouldn't make a fine addition to their team no matter what team it was. And he landed at a really, really good space, a really good place to develop a career. Old schoolers will remember, and the college football award for the top receiver is named after him, Freddie Biletnikoff. He plays very much like a Freddie Biletnikoff. He's a little faster than Freddie, but the same kind of hands. This player could go down in history as one of the top receivers as far as numbers of receptions that you've seen. He's going to be used the same way. He's a different player, but he's going to be used the same way as the other guy that I like, the Shepard at the Giants. And I look for very similar numbers, maybe 75 as far as total number of passes, and probably a little less than Shepard at touchdowns. Let's go 6, and at the 14th and 15th round, that's wonderful production.
All right, Cooper Kupp, he can make it happen, and we are making it happen again for you, answering your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, everything. Coming up after our final break, Ferrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, which you can register for right now at KFFSC.com, Facebook.com/KFFSC as well. I'm Eric Balkman, and we are getting to the fantasy feedback right after this on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour right here on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. We are back from our final break. I am Eric Balkman. He is Ferrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, right here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. Ferrell, I got that year right? This is the 16th year of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship, 2017?
It is, my friend. It started with 24 teams, Balky, 16 years ago.
16 years ago. That's just crazy to think about when you look at it. I think about where I was 16 years ago. I was only an 8-year-old kid. I've already started lying about my age on the show. I was actually a 6-year-old kid back then. Ferrell, we have so much to get to here. Rob, do not play the drop because we got a lot of stuff. The thing is, when you have an electric talent like Ferrell Elliott come on the show, the emails and everything just floods right in. So there's so much to get to. And the first one is actually a message we received on Facebook from Nate Vetter. And he writes, is there a running back to target in Denver? Follow-up for Ferrell, are you coming up to Pittsburgh to see the Avett brothers at Farm Aid? Your homie, Nate Vetter. Nate, thank you so much for connecting with the show. Ferrell, before we get to the Broncos running back discussion, is Pittsburgh on your summer travel this year to see the Avett brothers?
The Farm Aid did not like any of my clients this year. They said stay on the farm down in Kentucky. So I will not be making that trip, but I sure would like to get Nate. I promised him backstage for an Avett Brothers concert in his future, and it's going to happen. Most likely he's going to have to go cross-country to do it to the Kaboo Festival in San Diego 2018. But I've got that lined up for Nate. Nasty Nate. That's my boy.
And for anybody who likes the Avett Brothers and are looking for something a little bit more harder, maybe a little bit more lo-fi, I like the Quiet Hollers. It's a fantastic band, and it's their albums I've been listening to at work. Great stuff, and J. Ferrell Elliott is their representation. So great stuff from the Quiet Hollers for sure. Let's get to the Broncos running back discussion. Ferrell, you already kind of answered this question before the break. You're off everybody in that situation. You don't know who to trust. And I'll tell you what, I was Mr. C.J. Anderson last year, and I don't think I will be this year, given that his ADP hasn't really changed. He's going at the 604. I guess that's a little bit further down than where he was. But there's more question marks going into this year. I hear a lot of people talking up Devontae Booker. If I'm going to take a Broncos running back, probably getting him because he's only going and, you invest a 15th round pick in him and you can probably get him. But that's pretty much it for me. I'm not terribly excited about anybody in this offense. For the rushing
I think
attack.
I want to see the preseason and Balky. Shameful show prep on me. There were draft pick running backs in Denver, and there's one that I very, very much like, and I can't recall his name here tonight. Kid out of Utah.
D'Angelo Henderson?
I believe. Give me another one. It's not Henderson. But
no, it wasn't Henderson. Let me look
darn it, I shouldn't have even brought it up. But my point
No, hold on. We'll keep talking, and I'll find out who it is.
The talent just keeps coming into the Denver backfield, and now they say they're going to use them less and pass the ball more. And I'm not sure who's going to be throwing the ball. I suppose eventually it's going to be Paxton Lynch, a rookie quarterback, letting it fly in Denver. There's just a lot of things that, if you're going to like anything, like the two receivers and stay out of this backfield. If you're talking about C.J. Anderson being drafted in an ADP a few picks before Marshawn Lynch, that tells me that a lot of guys are drafted teams from 2015 and not paying a lot of attention to what the future might look like. Don't draft last year's team, guys.
Ferrell, I can't believe you and I both missed on this. You know who the other running back in Denver is this year? Jamal Charles.
Well, yeah, we know Charles is there, and Charles is saying that his knee feels fine. It's got to be bionic at this point in time, but he does feel fine, and that's the wild card there. He's the one player that could take with that pass for one of those quarterbacks and run 80 yards with it for a touchdown. You just don't know. You just don't know. I might like two of these guys on a Draft Masters team, and then I would feel real smart about myself if I hit pay dirt with one or two of them. But I sure don't want to put them on my 20-man roster.
Let's see how many of these emails we can get through here in the last roughly 10 minutes of the show. Ron in Panama City, Florida. Why are more people not on Jameis Winston this year? He's set records for all of the yardage he's piled up his first 2 years in the league. And we have beat writers and pundits saying he's an MVP dark horse. What am I missing? Thanks, guys. Thanks for the email, Ron. Ferrell, Jameis Winston, a guy you can get in the 9th round. Are you going to be on him this year?
No, Ron, I sure am. And by the time you get to Las Vegas to draft in the FFPC at Planet Hollywood, by the time you get to Kentucky in August to draft, you're going to find a lot of people that you won't have to ask that question because you'll see Winston moving up the boards, and deservedly so.
This is an interesting one, Ferrell, because since you are a player agent, you might have some insight on this. Tom in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Where do you guys land on Watkins? He can never stay on the field, but he's also never been in a contract year before. Thanks for the email, Tom. Sammy Watkins going at the 404 drafts right now. Ferrell, I have never drafted Watkins in my life. The only time I ever did was when I was co-managing a team with Kurt in Kentucky. I drafted him then, but I feel like Kurt was the one who decided to draft him then. And then I picked him up on waivers a couple of times last year when he got dropped and he was placed on IR. What's it like for a player? I mean, is there something to this contract year? It's a phenomenon that we've heard. And are you on Watkins this year?
Not on Watkins this year. Yes, there's always something to a contract year. It's a boom or bust situation. They told you what they thought about their quarterback in Buffalo. Says, if you want to come back, nobody else wants you, and you want to come back, we'll take you back, but we'll take you back at lesser money. He's a very fine NFL player, but he's a boom or bust guy. You've got scheduling issues with who they play, and then you've got weather issues late in the year. Chances are that he could be playing in freezing, sub-freezing temperatures in Buffalo, 40-mile-an-hour winds coming off the lake when you're trying to play for your championship in Week 13. I think that devalues the player in fantasy ball.
Yeah, new head coach, new offense, a lot of question marks with Watkins again this year. Roy in Paynes Creek, California. Hi, Eric and Dave. It's actually Ferrell this week. My first year playing FFPC, and I'm curious how most owners draft tight ends. Do you guys like to draft a bunch or get one super early? What's the path to success here? Ferrell, what's been sort of your strategy? I feel like you're not married to anything. Sometimes you'll draft the tight end early. Sometimes you get a few late. What have you done mostly in your FFPC career?
I've spent a lot of years trying to figure it out. I've gone too early and I've gone too late. I was being stubborn one year and didn't grab a tight end to the 13th round. I think with the dual flex and with the way that the position has evolved, and you've got a lot of guys this year. Minnesota's tight end Rudolph, Martellus Bennett's an excellent player. Delaney Walker's always an excellent player. The two guys, I don't think Brake disappears from that Tampa offense, and the rookie at Tampa, Howard, good-looking ball players. I think there's so many good tight ends this year that you want to get in the tight end business, and you want to have multiple good tight ends on your team. You want to have 3 solid tight ends on your FFPC team.
This next one's from Chris in Muncie, New York. We know Balky's not a huge fan of Samaje Perine, which usually means he's in for a massive year. Ferrell, do you like Perine as a top 25 running back this season? TIA, that's Chris in Muncie, New York. Ferrell, Samaje Perine is going at the 8-10 in drafts right now. Rob Kelly going at the 10-06. I don't know if you favor either one, but what are your thoughts on how good Samaje Perine can be as a rookie in Washington?
Kelly was a uncelebrated free agent sign, and he was very good at the end of the year. Perine can be excellent, and he's a number 1 back. He's going to go higher than that when people see him in the preseason. I mean, he's going to look good. He's going to go higher than that, and I think he'll present very good value in the draft. We'll just have to see how they're going to use him. It's always an explosive and interesting offense in that division. Washington's going to have to score a lot of points to compete with the other teams in the NFC East. So, yeah, Perine's a very solid player. Definitely early. Go ahead and get him. Go ahead and draft him.
Yeah, I always like that about those NFC East teams. You draft those guys, they always seem to get into shootouts, which is always so great for fantasy. Neil in Houston, Texas, which Titan receiver would you rather own this year, Corey Davis or Eric Decker? And Ferrell, the ADPs on these guys have changed over the last couple of weeks, especially since Decker signed in Tennessee. Guys are both going in the late 9th round, and now Eric Decker is going in the late 8th round. Corey Davis has fallen to the late 10th. Do you think FFPC drafters have it right? Is Decker the guy to own over Davis?
They do, and Decker will give a solid play through the year. I've always been a Decker fan. He has a good way of finding the end zone. You know, historically, he's going to find the end zone for you. And I think he'll thrive in this offense. I think he's got a great situation for himself. They did a good job with finding this player a place to play. I think he's going to be happy. I think he's going to like being in that culture of the Titans locker room.
Next email is from Russ in Tigard. I don't know how it is. Oregon, somewhere in Oregon. Tigard, we'll say it. Hi, Eric and Ferrell. I keep getting Alshon Jeffrey at the 3-4 turn in my FFPC satellites. Do you guys think I'm paying too much for him? Absolutely love this podcast. Thank you so much, Russ. Well, he actually is going right at that spot. So I would say from a value standpoint, it's not like you're overdrafting him comparing to where he is going in FFPC drafts right now. The 311, Ferrell, is that appropriate value for Alshon Jeffrey there?
You're going to be rewarded because you've got a quarterback throwing the ball. You know, Jeffrey's had a hell of a time with dealing with quarterbacks in Chicago. Now he's got a rookie a second-year quarterback that has come a long way that I really, really admire. Jeffrey has the size, he's got adequate speed, and he's on a 1-year deal, Balky. You talk about a player that wants to show up and get paid. He's on a 1-year deal. I like it. You know, if we can see him developing chemistry with Carson Wentz, watch how their relationship is. Watch how during the preseason, because neither one of them will play that much, watch how they're standing around and communicating on the sidelines. You can learn a lot from that. Alshon Jeffrey is really primed for an excellent year.
Larry in Weehawken, New Jersey. Let's move on to him. He writes, hello, Wisconsin and Kentucky. Any love for Latavius Murray if he is indeed named the starter over Dalvin Cook this season? Thanks for the email, Larry. That was kind of bizarre. We saw something this week. I don't know if it was Zimmer or somebody on the coaching staff said Latavius Murray is the starter, which is weird because he's hurt right now, and Dalvin Cook looks great, and, you know, he was a second-round pick in Minnesota. It seems like the future at running back there. I don't know if that's just, you know, coach speak or, you know, what have you, but Dalvin Cook is going at the 504 in FFPC drafts. Latavius Murray is not being selected until the 710. Is there any value for Latavius Murray at the 710, Ferrell? Because I can't I can't see myself drafting him a whole lot with that price tag.
No, and this is a player that I admire. I really, really like. He's, what was it, 12 touchdowns last year? That saved you if you drafted Murray last year. I think we've got a situation where, they're not going to say it, but I think in Minnesota there's already a little buyer's remorse. If they thought they could have got a player at the position like they did in the draft with the rookie out of Florida State, then you're probably not going to see them get into the Latavius Murray business. He's going to be a contributor. He's going to be good for this team and a good football player. He's going to drive you crazy if you're going to try to start him in the FFPC or the KFFSC as your running back and expect big numbers.
Rob is telling me we only have time for one more, so I will go to Twitter for this one. And this was an account at David Gerzak actually tweeted out, "Wow, it's June 29th. Hashtag Andrew Luck isn't even throwing yet, nor being drafted at a discount. Hard pass on Luck for me, pun intended, hashtag fantasy." So that is what Dave said about Andrew Luck June 29th, which would have been yesterday. So you look at Andrew Luck going in FFPC drafts right now, Ferrell at the 6'11", not much of a discount. Are you concerned that he still is not throwing, or is this sort of the regimen that we expected to see from Luck this offseason?
When I'm not playing fantasy football in Las Vegas, for recreational purposes only, I'll make my way over to the craps table, and I suppose at the craps table it's just like everybody in Indianapolis. I'm waiting for Luck, because once he gets there, he's going to be fine. Tough ball player, good ball player. I'm not concerned about that. When camp's open, I'm sure this player is going to be there. But I want to see him. I want to see him play a little bit. And let's say he is. We determined that he is healthy. I don't know if I want to pay that price in the 6th round for a quarterback. Sometimes I've had him in the FFPC where he falls to the 8th, and that's when I want to draft my quarterback in the 10th. But if Luck is around in the 8th, early 8th round, and I'm there, I'm grabbing him. So that's what I think about Luck.
Great stuff from you, Ferrell. For everybody who is still interested and has inexplicably not signed up for the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship yet, go to KFFSC.com, Facebook.com/KFFSC, SquareUp.com/store/KFFSC, and of course, Ferrell, hit them with the digits again if they want to give you a buzz.
Oh, I'd love to hear from you this evening, guys. 502-523-5057. I'm working all day on July 4th. Give me a ring.
Well, and a very happy 4th to you, my friend. This was quite the pleasure. It always is when you sit in on this show. Let's do this again in a couple of weeks for sure, and just check in with you throughout the summer. We'd love to have you on to answer some more emails since you did such a great job with it tonight. A happy Independence Day to you, my friend, and we will talk to you and see you again very soon.
Thank you, Boggy.
Ferrell Elliott, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Always a pleasure to have him on, and I hope you enjoyed it. We went a little overtime tonight, but I don't feel that you'll be too upset about that, given the fact that it was a lot of Ferrell tonight, which is always good on this show. Okay, that is going to do it for tonight. Let's wrap things up, and I will thank Ferrell Elliott for coming on the show tonight. I want to thank the FFPC. I want to thank Rob, Bryce, and, of course, all of you for listening to us here on this holiday weekend. Very, very cool. Next week, no Dave again, but 2016 Football Guys Players Championship League champion and 2017 Pros vs. Joe's competitor Steve Reeses will be on the show. He will co-host with me. That will be exciting. I want to remind everybody to sign up for the Football Guys Players Championship in the main event. Register for those double-ups. Happy Independence Day, and your weekend starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com that was broadcast live and heard around the world. Eric and Dave will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from a guest much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Him again, the sound the engine in is like a bird. You see fireworks, the Corvette tires skirt the boulevard. I know how you work, I know just who you are. See, use a bitch, your almost probably switches out your DNA.
Hey, remember, we got satellites and dynasty leagues going on too, people. Those double ups, They're very exciting. Check them out, myffpc.com, and sign up for the KFFSC at KFFSC.com. Okay, final plug. We're done. Scott Engel, Hall of Fame Hour is up next on the Fantasy Sports Radio Network. Happy Independence Day. Be safe with those fireworks.
Progressive presents Mindflowness with Flow.
Before you lies a beautiful meadow. In that meadow, Progressive Direct has placed its auto insurance rates alongside those of competitors. You select the lowest rate and feel a great sense of calm. A great sense of...
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates so you can rest easy. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.